Right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union, weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580, weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time.
Democrats won decisive victories in major races across the country on Tuesday evening, overcoming any alleged downward pull of the president's poll numbers, lingering inflation, and growing global unrest. And they did so by relying on abortion, the issue that has emerged as their fail-safe since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade last year. In races in parts of the South and the Rust Belt, Democrats put abortion rights at the center of their campaigns, spending tens of millions of dollars on ads highlighting Republican support for abortion bans. Democratic officials have been saying for months that the fight for abortion rights has become the issue that best motivates Democrats to vote. And it also is the issue that persuades the most Republicans to vote for Democrats. Prime examples are victories last night by Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky, who criticized his opponent's defense of the state's near-total ban. Also, legislative candidates in Virginia who opposed the 15-week abortion ban proposed by the Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, also had a very big night. And the Ohio referendum establishing a right to abortion access in the Ohio Constitution won by overwhelming support. And Pennsylvania Supreme Court candidate who ran on abortion rights, Daniel McCaffery, also won, giving Democrats in that court, Pennsylvania's court, 5-2 majority. And a moderate Democrat who is among the New York City Council's most powerful members beat his Republican opponent last night. He prevailed in the Southern Brooklyn race. Democrats held a council seat that had shown signs of drifting away from their control. Democrats overwhelmingly control the New York City Council as many members ran unopposed, including Yusef Salaam, one of the so-called Central Park 5 defendants who won a hotly contested council primary in Harlem this past summer. And in weeks of interviews, Hamas leaders, along with Arab, Israeli, and Western officials who tracked the group, said the attack had been planned. This is the October 7th attack on Israel. They said it was planned and executed by a tight circle of commanders in Gaza who did not share the details with their own political representatives abroad or with their regional allies like Hezbollah, leaving people outside the enclave surprised by the ferocity, scale, and reach of the October 7th assault. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said today that Gaza should be unified with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority once the war ends. This is the strongest signal yet from the Biden administration about what it would like to see at the end of Israel's fight against Hamas in the enclave. And the House voted yesterday to censure Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. She's a Democrat of Michigan, formally rebuking the sole Palestinian American in Congress for her statements regarding the Israel-Hamas war. 22 Democrats joined most Republicans to pass the resolution, which accuses Congresswoman Tlaib of promoting false narratives surrounding Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel and calling for the destruction of the state. The vote was 234 to 188. The third Republican presidential debate will take place tonight. This is happening in Miami with the smallest field of contestants yet. Just 5 candidates will take the stage tonight. Now, this is down from the clamorous field of 8 who shouted and jostled their way through the first encounter in Milwaukee this past August. The question of U.S. assistance to Ukraine has divided the Republican Party and could display clear differences among the candidates over whether they would follow Trump's isolationist populist path. And House Republicans today are grasping for a way to avert a government shutdown. This is amid deep divides in their ranks over federal spending. This is a debate they've been having about should they compromise with the Democratic-led Senate and President Biden. We are only 10 days away from the funding deadline, and there hasn't been a lot of movement in either the House or Senate as lawmakers sort through the possible resolutions that could be passed and whether we are going to keep the government open. And Ivanka Trump, that is today, became the fourth member of her family to testify in a civil case brought by the New York Attorney General, offering her response to accusations of widespread fraud at the Trump Organization. During her testimony, she mostly deferred to the accountants, saying that they were responsible for many of the financial documents. She also said she's very proud of the work that she did with the Trump Organization. Ivanka seemed to be caught off guard as she left the courthouse, and protesters outside shouted, "Crime family." This concludes the prosecution's case. We expect that the defense will start its case on Monday after the court takes a break for the holiday on Friday. This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In this hour, I am joined by Johanna Maska. She's a political contributor for News Nation and also the CEO of Global Situation Room. She formerly worked at the White House under President Obama. Also in this hour, Jamarr Brown is here. He is a former executive director of the Texas Democratic Party and a Democratic strategist. And in hour two, you know what we do. We go deep and we dig behind the headlines and we bring you those stories that people are talking about. And today, the biggest news story is going to be the GOP third presidential debate that's happening in Miami. And although there are only 5 candidates who will be on that debate stage, Donald Trump, who will not be on the stage, will loom large. Lots of folks are looking at the matchup between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. This is Ron DeSantis' last chance to really prove that he is the second runner up to Trump and is an alternative to a Donald Trump presidency. But he has to do this in consideration of Nikki Haley, who has been gaining a tremendous amount of momentum. So in hour two, we're going to talk about the debates, what to expect, what you should be looking for, and what, if anything, the outcome, a positive outcome for any one of these 5 candidates could mean for the GOP nomination for president. So make sure you stick around for hour two as we chop it up about the GOP presidential debate. But before I bring on my guest, here's what I'm thinking about in real time. You know, there was so much talk leading up to yesterday's election about the Democrats, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's polling numbers were so low. Some pundits, political pundits, many of whom are on cable news and many of whom who write for various publications, were predicting that the Democrats would have an incredibly bad night. They looked at that New York Times poll that came out over the weekend, as well as some other polls that suggested that Biden is unpopular. And they extrapolated from those polls that issues like abortion would also suffer because of the presidential polling numbers. But boy, were those pundits wrong. Many of them having to really revise their strategy and come up with a new way to talk about what happened last night, because like the predicted red wave that was supposed to happen in the midterms last year that didn't happen, the Democrats, rather than having a bad night, had a phenomenal night last night, the elections that took place across the country. And despite, again, the media's insistence on salivating over a few bad polls for the president and ignoring every other poll that has him leading or ahead of Trump, the bottom line is that those polls a year out from the election really don't matter. At the end of the day, it's results. And from what we saw last night, the country is overwhelmingly in favor of the policies that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been advancing throughout the year. We need only look at what happened in Virginia. Glenn Youngkin spent nearly $15 million trying to take control of the Virginia government to pass an abortion ban. But Virginians, voters who went to the polls, soundly rejected his efforts, holding the state Senate and flipping the House of Delegates into Democratic control. We now will have the first African-American Speaker of the House in the Confederate state of Virginia. Also, in Kentucky, voters rejected Daniel Cameron. You'll remember him. He's the AG of Kentucky. He was the attorney general who refused to hold the cops who shot and killed Breonna Taylor. He refused to hold them accountable. He, in fact, was adamantly opposed to doing anything that would give justice to Breonna Taylor's family and the scores of supporters and advocates that appealed to him after she was brutally murdered in her own home. Somehow he thought he could do that and still become the next governor of Kentucky. Boy, was he wrong. He also expressed support for the Commonwealth's abortion ban that has absolutely, positively zero exceptions for rape and incest. Well, given Cameron's stand on Breonna Taylor, given his stance on abortion rights, he lost the Kentucky race for governor. Kentucky voters returned Andy Beshear, the Democratic incumbent, back to the governor's mansion. And this is in the state of Kentucky, where Donald Trump won by 26 points in 2020. So this is a state that overwhelmingly people expected a Republican to do well, and he didn't. So all of those pundits that predicted that the Democrats were, out and dead on arrival last night, boy, were they wrong. And I wish folks would just admit when they are wrong rather than trying to twist and contort their theories and now say, well, it really wasn't about Joe Biden. He wasn't on the ballot last night. It was about his policies. And although his policies may be popular, he is not. And I just say to all those Democrats out there that are doubting, just stay the course. Just keep doing the work that we're doing. Keep talking to our friends and neighbors. Keep reminding them of the great work Biden and Harris are doing, and remind them that you can't separate the policies of Joe Biden from the man. And when we get to 2024, we will do, hopefully, what we did last night, which is show this country that overwhelmingly people are supportive of the Biden-Harris administration. When we come forward, more of today's breaking and trending news right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities and sports figures, elected leaders and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580. And
we are back, and in this hour, we are tracking today's breaking and trending news with Jamarr Brown, a former executive director of the Texas Democratic Party and a Democratic strategist. And Johanna Maska is going to join us. She's a political contributor for News Nation and the CEO of Global Situation Room. She formerly worked in the Obama White House. All right, Jamarr, we being Democrats, we had a big night last night, although many pundits had counted the Democrats out. They said, we looked at that New York Times poll that says Biden's numbers are low. And, many expected that he would be a pull on the party, a downward pull. And they said that plus inflation could cause either Democrats to stay home across the country or to vote for candidates other than Democratic candidates. So what do you make of the success that Democrats had last night at the polls?
Well, one thing that's been very important that DNC Chairman Jamie Harrison has always said is that we need to organize all year, every single year in every election up and down the ballot. And I think this is a result of not just the DNC, but other Democratic-led organizations, state parties, progressive organizations, really getting on the ground and really doing the organizing and talking to people on a day-to-day basis. The second thing I think that we are noticing from this election is the Republicans have been so extreme. And at the end of the day, while they preached about freedom and individual liberties and all of that, we saw the laws that they passed, they've gone too far. And I think that a lot of voters connected with understanding that their rights were really on the ballot. Particularly draw your eyes to Ohio, where it's not a blue state, right? But 84% of Black men voted in favor of issue 1, nearly 90% of Black women. And so we also saw that Black people still led the way in many of those elections, from Kentucky to Ohio to Virginia and across the country. And so those are the things that we're seeing. And I do think this sets us up for 2024, but there's still everything that's going on in Israel. There's still inflation. There's still things that the president still has to tackle in his own reelection campaign to assure people at the highest level of government he sees them and he sees their needs.
I'm so glad you brought that up in terms of how African Americans voted for that Ohio ballot initiative that now enshrines a woman's right to abortion into the Constitution of Ohio. I had one of the activists on yesterday. She was a former candidate for Senate in Ohio, and she said that Republicans got very nervous near the end of this election and changed the language and used language like, giving rights to women for abortion would be killing unborn babies and using graphic language. And there's some polls that suggested there was some slippage amongst Black voters, primarily because Black voters are seen as more conservative on issues of abortion. So when you tell me that 90% of Black women voted yes, and a yes was a vote to enshrine the rights into the Ohio Constitution, and you said 84% of Black men voted?
84%. Yeah, that's actually an increase, quite frankly, on the Democratic side. And so there's always been this issue around where do Black people stand with the party, but particularly Black men, and we're seeing that Republicans and Donald Trump and others will be going after Black men. I think they still will, but I think this is given a testament that there's deeper organizing, deeper connections with voters happening.
Yeah, you're talking about that Black men and Black women voters. So, Jamarr, what did you make of that New York Times poll that came out that says that 22% of Black voters were likely to vote for Donald Trump? Now, let me tell you, I had another pollster on yesterday, and she said that in her focus group and in her poll of Black voters identified Donald Trump and the MAGA agenda as the single most significant threat to them. So when you look at Black voters responding in that poll to this New York Times poll, it's kind of hard to it's hard to see how they both can coexist and be true at the same time. What are you hearing from Black voters?
Yeah, sure. And I think the reason that you see that, at least in my opinion, is that at the end of the day, these races that happened yesterday were very local, right? You're talking about your school board, your city council, your governor, right? Issues, that were on the ballot. And sometimes when you have a presidential election, the presidential election can be further removed from people's day-to-day lives. And so I think that when you talk to Black voters, sometimes Black men, especially in southern states or more urban areas, what you tend to see is that they're disconnected from understanding how the office of the president is navigating some of the issues that they care about, mostly about job creation, right, generating revenue and wealth for their families, right, criminal justice issues and those sort of things. And so the Biden campaign is really going to have to do a lot of work to really show that they're reaching into those issues and giving localities and states the power to be able to make a difference. And they're going to have to show that in their messaging.
Yeah, Johanna, I know you've joined the conversation. One of the things that we saw yesterday, too, were a lot of the pundits who were expecting the Democrats to just get a shellacking yesterday. They had to pivot from a lot of what they were saying, and how they pivoted in some cases was to say, well, Joe Biden wasn't really on the ballot yesterday, and Democratic voters and even independent voters may vote for policies like abortion rights, but that doesn't mean that they're going to vote for Joe Biden next year. What do you make of that argument where they're trying to separate the policies of Biden from the person or the messenger or the executor, the person who's executing those policies? What do you make of that argument and the way some pundits had to pivot? Because quite frankly, they were wrong. Democrats had a phenomenal night.
Yeah, Areva, it was funny because last night I was on with a Republican strategist on the Hill on News Nation, and he says, it's going to be tight in Ohio, and when it is, it's going to be a good night for Republicans. And of course, it wasn't tight in Ohio. It was a blowout in Ohio. And then tonight, Sean Spicer was saying, it's the messaging that we got wrong. I'm like, it's not the messaging. It's the policy. People don't want you involved in their most important decision. And so they've told you that over and over. And now they're saying, well, now we're just going to say it's a state's issue. And the problem with that is in states, they are banning abortion. I mean, in Ohio, there was a 12-year-old raped who couldn't get an abortion. That's not okay. So, we've got to look at our communities. And I think, when it comes to Biden, well, people may have a loveless marriage because he's an 81-year-old president. His policies are popular. Investing in American manufacturing. He just won another union fight in Michigan by really letting the union, backing the union and going forward. When it comes to the issues that he's taking on just this week, he's taking on the unaffordability of housing insurance. He's taking on issues that do affect Americans with the cost of housing, with the cost of energy, with the cost of healthcare. And those things translate to actually, our bottom line. And while inflation is up worldwide, Biden is trying to help the average American more than any of the Trump administration folks are. And so to see them twist themselves in these turns today over abortion, it's like, really?
Yeah, they were tying themselves in knots, Joanna. In fact, Sean Hannity even said Republicans aren't against abortion. Like, what? Like, did you really say that? So the disingenuous and the gaslighting that happened today because they got such a shellacking has really been mind-blowing. And Jamarr, one of the questions I have, so we go back to the red wave that was supposed to happen in the midterms that didn't happen. We look at Virginia, where Yorkin spent $15 million, and not only did we flip the House of Delegates, we won the Senate. Now we have the first African-American speaker in that Confederate state. Well, Republicans see that Donald Trump doesn't have any coattails, and he hurts the party down ballot tickets. He's not shown himself capable of lifting up candidates, and across the board, he has done so much damage to the Republican Party. Do you think they're ever going to wake up and see that this guy is toxic? And getting him elected is not going to be worth all the other elections they lose because of him and his policies.
Well, to be quite honest with you, I mean, really the thing that should have given it away to Republicans is what happened in Kansas last year, right? In particular around what we were just talking about in Ohio. right? When you look at these attacks and how voters have shown up against them, it's not your typical blue states that they would say. It's Kansas, it's Ohio, right? It's Kentucky, where people, even Mississippi, let's give Mississippi credit that they closed the margins, right, yesterday, right? Even though I know they weren't successful, but they got closer than really in modern years. And so, what the Republicans are going to have to experience, they're going to have to hit rock bottom. And because the signs have literally been there. They've seen it in elections, right, where they lost control of the U.S. Senate, down in Georgia in the runoff last year, right? You're seeing these things happen on these issues, and they're going to have to hit rock bottom where they're not in power. And the problem, Areva, that we have with the Republicans right now is in many states, they actually still are in power, right? Whether it's, especially in southern states and some western states, whether they hold a governorship or they're in control of the legislature. And so they're still seeing some power. And they're going to have to start losing that. And that's where I think Democrats are starting to make some strides to understand why local and state elections are so important.
Yeah, one of the things, too, we also saw, Johanna, was with Moms for Liberty, this group of conservative women that came into power during COVID and who took over school boards across this country. They had this big convention in the summer, had all the Republican presidential candidates come and kiss their rings and basically beg them for their endorsements. They also got blown out last night. They supported about 35 school board candidates, and they had very little success with those candidates. And I think it was, again, voters saying, although we may have agreed with some of your policies around vaccines and closing schools, they did not agree with the aggressive extremist policies that Moms for Liberty started supporting around book banning and, bashing, gay rights and making it more difficult for students who are members of the LGBTQ community to come out and to be seen and to be heard in schools. So we should also look at what happened with those women, because I think that tells us a lot about 2024. When we come forward, we're going to talk more about the election of last night and also the censure of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and the discord in the Democratic Party over this war involving Israel and Hamas. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, dog?
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader. If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black.
Follow the leader.
Following the leader.
Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar,
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
There's a new sheriff in town.
All right, I'm Dr. Nicordelai Corte, and starting September 18th, I couldn't be more thrilled than invite you to join us for the launch of A More Perfect Union. Weekdays right here on KBLA Talk 1580. Weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Time. That's 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. A More Perfect Union promises to deliver national news of consequence, informed opinion.
All right, we are back with Johanna, Maska, and Jamarr Brown, and we're breaking down what happened yesterday. The Democrats had a very big night across the country, even though lots of pundits did not expect it. But there's some other news that I want to make sure we cover, and starting with the 22 Democrats that voted with Republicans, Johanna, to censure the Congresswoman from Michigan, the only Palestinian American Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib. What do you make of that? I think obviously, it bothered me on a lot of different levels, but one of the things that was said about the censure was she was censured for disseminating false information. So I'm sitting here thinking of every Republican that has promoted false narratives. They called it false narratives. What do you make of the 22 Dems voting with Republicans to censure this Congresswoman?
I make that they're likely in divided districts in which they are scared of the ads of being tied with anything that would be seen to be pro-Palestinian. The truth is that we've used censures too much lately. I mean, Adam Schiff was just censured. And you are absolutely right that the Republicans say crazy things. And my understanding is the Dems were ready with a censure for a Republican who said a crazy thing. But the problem is now Jamie Raskin and others said they believe that people should be able to speak their minds. That is what you have as a representative of your district. You should be able to say what you want to say. And so now they're kind of hand-tied at going after the Republicans, even though the Republicans are in many cases saying crazier things, and they've had white supremacists in the party that they have not censured. So real problems there.
Which is why I was really outraged with those Democrats, Jamarr, that voted with the Republicans. To your point, Johanna, we've seen white supremacists in Congress who have made statements that have been completely inappropriate, offensive, and, anti-Black, have demonstrated anti-Blackness. And Jamarr, we haven't seen this. So, what does this say about where we are as a Congress? And Congresswoman Tlaib is from a state that has a large Palestinian American population. They voted for her. They sent her to Congress to represent them. So I'm not sure, you can take exception, I guess, with this, what some are calling the statement that she made that's calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. But how could she represent her district without standing in solidarity with Palestinians?
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about Congress right now is that everybody's district is so different. I mean, there are a lot of similarities in a lot of them, but all the districts, when you look, are very different. I do think that there's sometimes a strategy that some Democrats can employ around voting president or something, because I think at the end of the day, we have to find some unity in some of this, at least because the question here isn't just about Palestinians and the remarks that the representative made. It's also about freedom of speech in the House, right? And people, like you said, Areva, who are elected by their constituents to represent a community should be able to speak about, and they're that voice in the people's house for that. And so I think that at the end of the day, that's going to be the conversation. And when we look at a strategy around censure, we should be censuring people for actions that are damaging to the culture and the decorum of the House, that are damaging to our democracy. And that's where what censures were built for, not particular remarks that we like or dislike on each side.
Yeah, this is dangerous, Johanna, because Debbie Wasserman Schultz is one of the Democrats that voted for the censure. You have now mostly women of color in Congress feeling like they're being attacked. Debbie Wasserman used the term soulless in describing those Democrats that voted to censure Congresswoman Tlaib. And then some of the African-American Congresswomen reminded her that soulless is a term that was used during slavery to describe slaves. And, it's a pejorative term towards Black folks. So now you got like this war between, Jewish Congress people and potentially African Americans. So where does this, where does this end? How does this ever end?
Well, the truth is this has been good for fundraising. I mean, Adam Schiff was censured and he's been able to fundraise more. It's really, it's really unfortunate what's happening in our politics, because you're right, we don't find the areas that we can agree on. And when I watched her speak, and she got very emotional because she's talking about people she knows, there's communities in our Los Angeles community where they are fighting for the rights of the people of their home country, and they're going to tear up about these things, and they should have the right to say that. Now, the problem is we're censuring everybody for everything. And there are right now hate crimes going on in America. Too many Muslim Americans don't feel safe. Too many Jewish Americans don't feel safe. I feel those strong emotions. But unfortunately, the censure isn't going to change anything, right? That's not going to change hate. The censure is probably going to be, if it's anything like the asset that Adam Schiff used it for, it's something you fundraise off, and it's just ugly. It's like a continuing cycle. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the same.
Yeah, well, she was one of the sponsors of the resolution for the censure, and then another Republican came forward. But just a thought for me of these Democrats, like you said, Jamarr, figure out another way to vote on this. The speaker has been walking this fine line, Hakeem Jeffries, and trying to keep this party together. And we need the Democrats united. After the win last night, we need to stay focused. We need to be laser focused on 2024 and how we ensure that we ride this momentum from last night into something very successful in 2024. We got some issues. So let's talk about this war, Israel versus Hamas, or Israel's, commitment to eradicate Hamas, suggesting, I guess, Netanyahu yesterday that perhaps there was going to be occupation of Gaza. And now we have Antony Blinken coming out saying, wait, no, Gaza needs to be united with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority once this war ends, basically saying to Israel, not your occupation. And we now see, Johanna, a division in the Dem party over ceasefire, humanitarian pause. So this war could have a incredibly devastating impact on how people vote next year, because we know those Muslim Americans in Michigan, swing state, are saying we are not voting for Joe Biden. So what does the Biden administration do? Because there are so many growing voices against Israel's attack and approach to this war.
He is walking a very fine line, because Bibi Netanyahu did do things he shouldn't have done. I mean, no Democratic president has agreed with Bibi Netanyahu in recent history. And yet Bibi Netanyahu's country was attacked by a terrorist organization that wants to wipe out the entire state and the people. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. We're dropping tomorrow. We do this One Decision podcast, which is exploring global decisions. And we've got the Palestinian National Authority, the former prime minister, as well as an Israeli leader, really looking at this, in a way with Sir Richard Dearlove, who was the former chief of MI6, in what could actually reassure that region of their security. It's not going to be Israel. It could be some combination of, you've got Turkey, Erdogan, you've got Saudis, you've got all sorts of other regional players who have more trust in the Palestinian, people to get involved with the Palestinian Authority. But it is, these decisions are so laser, if you do one thing wrong and you step off that line, the whole region could very quickly. I mean, we've got nuclear weapons over there.
Yeah, it's very, very precarious situation we find ourselves in, Jamarr. And I'm just wondering, when we come forward, I want to talk about how much longer can the Biden administration continue to give Israel this big bear hug and say that they are not in support of a ceasefire, when you have the Red Cross, you have the UN, you have all these other humanitarian efforts that are saying we can't even provide food and water without risking our own lives. And you have the other Arab nations saying this war could destabilize all of the Middle East and just can spread very quickly. So lots of difficult questions, obviously, for the Biden administration. But I do want to talk about this ceasefire and how much longer you think the Biden administration can withstand now what are pretty loud pleas from the U.S. as well as some folks in Israel to do something to stop this constant bombardment that we're seeing by Israel. Stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head. Yeah.
We boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black. Follow the leader. Following the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar. Shot with a rest bar. Shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of...
All right, Jamarr, there is growing pressure on Joe Biden and his administration to put pressure on Israel to entertain some kind of ceasefire, humanitarian pause or something. And the Israeli government keeps saying that, that's not even on the table. It's not a possibility, that if they do anything like a pause or anything that, looks similar to a pause, that it would only be aiding Hamas. It would only give them more of a strategic advantage. But we have 250 hostages that we're not talking a whole lot about in the news anymore. So how much longer do you think the Biden administration can withstand these, calls and this pressure to change course, at least slightly even, with Israel?
Yeah, I think the thing to consider, especially around the calls for a ceasefire, be considerate that it is a wing or component of the party of folks that are calling for President Biden to push for a ceasefire. I don't think that he will have too much longer. But because there's a lot of factors here that are at play, right? There's humanitarian need, right? And that's not happening because of the violence and the attacks in the region. But there's also, like you just mentioned, hostages, right? And how do we navigate that, right? Because even with a ceasefire, that doesn't deal with the diplomatic situation that we're trying to navigate around getting the hostages free and to safety, also as well. And so the United States, outside of everything that's happening between Hamas and Israel, the United States has its own, not just diplomatic interests, but human capital interests in terms of people who are being made hostages. So I do think that this is unfortunately going to go on a little bit longer. I think that we see the Secretary of State trying to step up his diplomatic efforts to get the hostages free. But there's really the really progressive wing of the party. And so now as you start to look toward the 2024 election, it's got to happen pretty soon because that is a key contingent. And that was a key contingent that was really involved around the Hillary Clinton campaign that we remember back in 2016. And Biden's going to need to really coalesce this party in the next few months, especially getting out of the presidential primary season. And so he doesn't have too much longer, but he's also got to walk that fine line.
And Johanna, it's not just progressives. Let's talk about young voters. Young voters have a totally different approach to this crisis than older voters have. And we know right now, past presidential election, older voters still outnumbered younger voters. But if Biden is going to win, he's going to need young voters. He's going to need millennials, and millennials don't understand or see it being so complicated. They see it pretty black and white. Here's this Israeli government, just bombarding this country, and we're watching these children and babies die, and it just needs to stop. I mean, it's kind of that simple for them.
They see it black and white, and it's so much more gray, and that's the hard thing, right? Because Hamas has been the ones who's been terrorizing the Palestinian people, putting their bunkers under the schools and the hospitals. They are, the Hamas leaders are making all sorts of money and leaving to Qatar, and they're terrible. Like, they're terrorists of their own people. And I always want to, I think this is why President Obama's comments that he made about, trying to find a solution were so important, because there isn't a ready-made solution that with the Palestinian Authority or some likes would give people what young voters would want, which would be LGBTQ equality, women's rights, the rights of the oppressed. Those are things that are not valued. It's not even discussed in many of these conversations.
Yeah, and it's so interesting you say, let me say this, Joy, it's so interesting that you say it's Hamas who's putting the Palestinian people at risk by building bunkers under their schools and hospitals. That's not how young people see it. Young people see it as Israel has created the largest open air prison in the world, that Israel has, prevented the Palestinians from having a two-state solution, and that it is Israel, the government, not the people, but the government of Israel that is at fault for the most part. So, your perspective, obviously, one of the journalists I saw, he says, don't ask someone in a diner about these complex geopolitical issues, because, you're not going to get an informed response. But in some ways, we are going to be asking the folks at the diner who are going to the polls, these young people, to make a vote. And if they have these images of Palestinians, and these are a lot of young Jewish kids who march with Black Lives Matter, who see this as an extension of that same kind of social justice issue, people of color being oppressed.
Well, and Netanyahu had been expanding, not contracting, the building continual settlements. So Netanyahu was problematic. Now, Netanyahu is not just solely in charge right now. It's a coalition government. And I think that people need to recognize that Israel is the democracy in this region too. So again, if we're looking at giving people more rights, it's not going to be Israel that's going to be able to solve the problem, because there's so much distrust. And that's why I thought it was it was good, even though there were a lot of Jewish former staffers of President Obama who were very upset with his comments he made at our reunion. He said, we all have blood on our hands. And he's referencing, we cannot continue to settle in this area. That said, Israel is the democracy here. They are the ones who give more rights. They have LGBTQ rights. They have rights for women. They have rights for Palestinians who have lived there. And it's interesting listening to Nusayr Yazan, who I've known, who's a younger Palestinian Israeli, talk about taking for granted what he had growing up in Israel as a Palestinian.
Yeah, really complex issue, Jamarr. Obviously, we're not going to solve it for the president today. If we had the perfect answer, we would shoot it to him and he could, get the country out of this. But real quickly, 10 days, we might be back to a government shutdown. Is our speaker, the GOP, Mike Johnson, is he up for the task of getting us through what's going to be a big showdown?
Well, that remains to be seen, because even in the short time that he's been the speaker, look at what's come before the floor, right? We're talking about censures and other motions and other things when we have bigger fish to fry. And so when it looks to this spending, how does he coalesce the Republicans? It's going to be the question. I think the Democrats will be united in that. And so that's remaining to be seen, because you have your Marjorie Taylor Greens, you have your Matt Gaetz, right? And they have their own little issues that they want to navigate. And then the other piece is they have to get back to the farm bill. So he's got two big things coming ahead, and also the funding requests from the president. And so he has not shown that he's been able to coalesce yet. And the real thing that you have to see is when the vote happens, because that always gives you a little bit of if they have the votes or not. And I don't think he brings it to the floor if he doesn't have the votes.
What are you expecting, Johanna? 10 days, again, back in the same dilemma that Kevin McCarthy found himself in, which led to his ouster.
Areva, the GOP has a Little Johnson problem. It's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen. Look, this guy was unvetted. He's had, no leadership experience. Now we're finding out he's got, some weird stuff with his son where they monitor each other's porn with some digital spyware. He's got, no bank account. I have no problem with someone not having a lot of money, but, he's making a lot of money. There's all sorts of questions. And now he's got to get every one of these Republicans who disagree on so many things on the same page. What I expect, because the Republicans have already signaled, is they are giving him permission to do a continuing resolution that's going to get him through into December, and then he's going to have the problem. And this fight is not going away. I don't know how long.
But is that continuing resolution, Johanna, is going to come with some major funding cuts, like the last resolution that cut the IRS budget? Is that what they're getting
what
permission to do?
Joke, right? Like, we really want to let tax cheats off. I mean, the Trump administration, when we're talking about inflation, they spent more money, went to fraud through PPP than we have spent in Ukraine. If you want to talk about too much money in the economy that leads to inflation with not enough production, that was what caused inflation. And yet, it's somehow blamed on Biden. They are going to try, they've already tried to tie Israel funding to cuts for IRS agents, which will actually cost the government money. And they can't explain, because the CBO has said this, they can't explain how it's any different. And it's
Johanna, remember, they don't trust they don't trust any reports coming out of the government because it's the deep state. So
they quoted the CBO, and then in one sentence later, it was incredible. Steve Scalise, who also spoke at a David Duke event and was up for Speaker of the House, guys. Like, this is messed up. But Steve Scalise in one voice says, the CBO and they estimated this, and then the other voice, well, no, we don't trust the CBO when they say that.
Well, that's pretty standard fare, Johanna. The hypocrisy of the Republican Party is nauseating, frustrating, and not logical. So we're not going to make any sense of it. We are out of time.
I'm going to keep trying to talk to them every day.
We appreciate that. We appreciate that. Johanna, Maska, Jamarr Brown, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to continue this conversation when we come forward about the GOP debate that's going to take place in probably it's already happening. We have two political pundits that are going to help us know what to watch for in today's debate. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580. All right,
guys. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though.